Welcome to the Road to the Civil War Project with Wah, Alahaj, Olivia Brooke, and James. Alright, first slide. What was the political, economic, and social landscape of America by 1853? To start off, northern industries grew drastically, mainly in textile manufacturing. New technological advances like steam power improved the growth of industries and increased their efficiency. Another key factor in the economy was the development of railroads and how they help transport important materials to factories and also help connect the regions together. The market revolution also played a key part in the economic landscape of America because of how it led to the growth of northern textile factories, but also led to a high demand of southern cotton and a high demand for slavery. The political landscape of America contained free and slave states arguing back and forth about slavery and territorial expansion, which nearly led to the war that was stopped by the Compromise of 1850. Manifest Destiny also played a key role in Mexican-American War because America uh, felt like they had the God-given right to expand to the Pacific Ocean, which led to the Mexican-American War. Socially, hardcore abolitionist movements gained traction in the North, while Southern states defended slavery to protect their agrarian economy. In the South, they felt like the need for slavery was very important because it gave them the power to feel like the slave institution was so powerful that they could expand it to regardless of America, Europe, Asia, and many other places. But hardcore abolitionist movements in the North wanted to see the full stop of slavery. Northerners really didn't feel like slavery was something that was needed and felt like it was inhumane and unfair treatment of people.
What caused outbreak of warfare in April of 1861? So basically, what happened was Fort Sumter, which was in South Carolina, was a symbol of federal authority in Charleston, right? Which was heart of the Confederacy, right? Because that's the first state that seceded. Okay, but the South wanted the fort due to it being in South Carolina. They wanted the fort, but the president at the time, Buchanan, refused and tried to reinforce the fort, sending more supplies there. And South Carolina attacked the ship, not the actual fort, just the ship, to show control. And then the ship turned back around. Then when Lincoln came into office in March, Anderson, which was a farmer slave holder from Kentucky that was in charge of the fort, was running out of supplies, and he knew that eventually they would have to surrender or leave. Jefferson Davis, who was the leader of the Confederacy, didn't want federal presence in the country that they thought was independent now, South Carolina. So then Beauregard attacked the fort that Lincoln was trying to send food to and medicine, because it was blocking an important water port, right? So then Anderson surrendered due to it being no ammunition and food, because why am I here anymore? And they lost. So then, yeah, they surrendered, went back to New York. And then when they went back to New York, they were seen as heroes and everything. But the North was very mad because we lost. And then the war officially started. Factors that motivated the Southerners to secede. One factor was Abraham Lincoln's election. The Southerners thought that he was going to abolish slavery, even though that wasn't even possible for him to do. Tariffs raised the price for things that they needed and only benefited the factory workers, leaving the Southerners to believe that the government only favored the North, which it did at the time. Popular sovereignty. The government believed that the federal government wouldn't respect the Southerners believed that the federal governor wouldn't respect the states' rights and take them away from him. Why did Virginia take so long to secede? Many border states were mixed on whether or not they should secede. Virginia in particular, the west counties of Virginia didn't know. Well, they didn't want to secede, but other counties did want to secede. So that kind of put Virginia on the fence until, they seceded. They declared that they wouldn't secede until the North became violent, and they did after Lincoln called troops. Factors that motivated Northern senators to go to war after the attack on Fort Sumter. Lincoln declared a state of insurrection existed and declared that the war to preserve the Union united the North. Northerners believed that the war was going to be easy and lighthearted and felt disdain towards the Southerners. Us losing to Fort Sumner took the Northerners by surprise and upset them, and the attack to Fort Sumner brought unity to the North, making them all want to fight for their country.
Advantages and disadvantages of the United States and the Confederate armies. Advantages of the North included a bigger population, more food, better transportation, a better navy, the Anaconda Plan, and slaves and blacks joining, and better artillery. Disadvantages of the North included underestimation, having to capture and win and defend territories, and having some of the natives join the Confederate armies against them. Advantages of the South included only having to defend their territory instead of having to actually win any battles. Disadvantages included material cutoffs from the Anaconda Plan and no financial security because of because of higher currency being produced.
Key battles, military leaders, and campaigns. Battle of Bull Run. People didn't take the war as serious. Young men signed up for fun and glory of what they thought would be an easy, short victory. Even reporters, congressmen, and just random people came to watch the battles. The Confederacy won the Battle of Bull Run. They had a rebellion that scared the Union soldiers. Lincoln realized small victories won't win the war, so he reorganized the whole army. He called for volunteers, fire generals, anyone who would join the army. Army of Potomac, which was the main Union army led by George B. McClellan, later replaced by Ulysses Grant.
Antietam. McClellan attacked Antietam Creek and Robert E. Lee withdrew. McClellan did not pursue and was relieved of duty. This was the last straw for Lincoln, considering after Bull Run, McClellan trained the army but never was ready to fight. And in the Peninsular Campaign of 1862, McClellan moved slowly and with caution. Runaway slaves sought refuge and were protected in Fort Monroe, and they were called contrabands of war. General Benjamin F. Butler justified it by saying that international law claims that they could take the other side's private property if that other side was using said property to help wage war. They claimed that any slaves who escaped to join the Union Army were free forever, and many started joining in droves. This later led to the Emancipation Proclamation, which many Northerners didn't like, especially peace Democrats, also known as Copperheads, who wanted peace, as well as those who did not like the extension of the war from a war to keep the country together to a war also about freeing slaves.
Battle of Vicksburg. 1862, Ulysses S. Grant couldn't defeat the Confederate garrison at Vicksburg, so he surrounded the city to starve it. A year later, July 4th, 1863, the Confederate forces surrendered. At the Mississippi River, now under the Union's control, and the Confederacy was cut in half. The South didn't have access to the Mississippi River, which also cut their access to supplies and isolated some states. Lincoln appointed Grant as a general-in-chief of all Union armies. This led many victories and was vital to the eventual surrendering of the South. Battle of Gettysburg. Confederate General Joseph Hooker led a march to Chancellorsville, but lost his nerves and retreated. He was replaced by General George Meade. Robert E. Lee advised Jefferson Davis to invade D.C. from the north to cut it off from the rest of the U.S. and end the war. They believed that the Union can't continue if the capital and major cities are under rebel. July 1st, Confederate forces drove Union forces out to Cemetery Hill, where the Union held its ground, and Lee realized they can't be dislodged, so he retreated on July 4th. Before this battle, the South was winning, and now with the big victory, this boosted Union morale.
Wilderness Campaign, a series of battles with the goal of destroying the Army of North Virginia, the Confederacy's main army, and taking Richmond. Battle of Wilderness. Grant marched to Virginia to attack Lee's army but stalled. The South attacked and he countered it, with no winner, but Grant pursued them after the battle unlike his predecessors. By the end of May, Union took control of Cold Harbor, Virginia. June 1864, Grant attacks Petersburg. He didn't retreat, but there was not much progress. This lack of progress was one reason for the Copperheads to rise up. Since the Union Army didn't make much progress, Lee and Davis thought that if they held Petersburg for long enough, the Copperheads would win the election and the two sides would make peace. This changed with Sherman's march. Sherman's march to the sea. When Grant went to Virginia, he left William T. Sherman in charge of the West Army. Sherman began marching to the heart of the Confederacy to cut it in half from west to east. He only fought when necessary, while avoiding major confrontations and keeping a careful eye on supply trains. They moved to Georgia when Confederate General John Bell tried to stop him from reaching Atlanta. Sherman changed course and Bell thought he surrendered. The troops moved to Georgia where Confederate General John Bell tried to stop him from reaching Atlanta. Sherman changed course and Bell thought he retreated. In the next battle on August 30th, Sherman won and Confederate soldiers evacuated and burned Atlanta. On September 1st, Sherman led troops to Atlanta and cut off his supplies since it was stretched to the limit, and they'd lived off the land instead. And on September 2nd, they captured Atlanta. Troops marched to the heart of the Confederacy since they thought the South was too busy fighting in the North to protect the heart. And on November 15th, they destroyed farms, factories, railroads, and anything the Confederacy could use. And on January of 1865, they went through the Carolinas, and they were determined to end it in South Carolina where it all started. They hoped to attack the Confederacy with Sherman from the South and Grant from the North. It demoralized the South, as people thought the Confederacy would protect them. They lost all their food and wrecked operations, which caused economic loss and completely changed the tides. This all would eventually lead to Robert E. Lee surrendering at the Battle of Appomattox.